Broadcast is now starting.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and welcome to today's webinar on how to create a culture by intention and recruit talent that aligns to improve performance. My name is Charles Summers. It's my pleasure to be serving as your moderator today. We've got a 45-minute presentation before we start a 15-minute Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, please use the GoToWebinar's questions queue. We'll make sure to answer some of those questions as we go when they make sense, but we'll get most of them answered during the Q&A session at the end. If you'd like to reach out to me about any Humantelligence webinar questions or future webinar topics, feel free to reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com or just chat me directly on LinkedIn. So many of you on today's call have already taken us up on some of our free tools out there, but if you haven't, no worries. Here are a couple things that you can try out. First, we have a great new Chrome, LinkedIn, and Slack plugin that will help you better communicate and collaborate with colleagues and your network based on their underlying culture. Also, from our homepage, you can take our self-assessment or invite a team to take it and get your results instantly. Once I hand things off to Juan here in a moment, I will put the links to these items in the chat. I'd also like to quickly announce a new product in the Humantelligence lineup called Hire Guru. Hire Guru is designed to give recruiting firms expert insights on how candidates will fit into their client's team culture and available roles. If you're familiar with our Talent Fit product, this is a similar offering, but specifically designed for independent recruiters. You can create an account and get your first free search or your first search for free. I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in trying it out. Go check that out and sign up and get access to the platform and that first search for free. Everything you're going to see on today's webinar can be accomplished through either our Talent Fit product or our Hire Guru product. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these slides throughout the presentation. This time, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Humantelligence CEO, Juan Betancourt. Juan, I'll go ahead and hand things off to you here. And Juan, you might be on mute. Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Apologies about that. So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time today to join us. We hope that today is a transformation, if you will, on how you think about culture and culture fit specifically, and then within that, what you can do in a tactical, actionable way to have a culture by intention. Next slide, Charles. So today's agenda, we're going to start with talking about what is culture by intention, or what many people say is culture of intention. Then we're going to move into what steps need to be taken prior to recruiting intentionally for a culture by intention, specifically how to measure culture and align it with strategy. We're going to then move into when to recruit for culture fit versus culture add, what that means, and how it depends and is based on your actual needs, maybe your strategy, or maybe there's a global pandemic. Sounds crazy, but maybe something called COVID might happen and everyone's now needing to work remote. And so imagine the culture change at a QSR fast food chain that used to have people come into the store, and now it's got to be curbside delivery. That's a different profile for the culture and what's important for that strategy that year. Next, we're going to go into the blue square there on the right in the middle on how to add culture benchmarks into your recruiting process, internally or as an external recruiter. And then we're going to finish with about 10-15 minutes of a Q&A. Next. So our goal again today is to give you some insights. We believe that these could be transformational insights so that you can be intentional in your recruiting efforts, depending on the culture needs of your organization. And again, I gave the example of COVID, but you can also have the example of wanting to have a diverse culture. And so for instance, many companies use quotas and affirmative action like programs to get the right number of minorities into roles. Unfortunately, that has proven to fail because you're actually not changing the culture by just plugging in people in different roles. What needs to happen is a change of the culture. Okay, and so we'll also show examples of how that happens. A third example that brings us to light clearly how culture can change is a startup. A lot of startups in technology or in any area, they probably have to be very change oriented in their behaviors, innovative in their value system and motivations, and probably very creative in the way they do things. That's what leads to a successful startup. But once that company hits $1 million in revenue, do you think that same culture that got them to $1 million is the same culture that should get them to 10 or 20 million or 100 million? Absolutely not. If a company actually keeps the same culture on what got them from a very creative shoot from the hip startup to 10 million to 1 million, they will definitely not succeed. And all the research shows that they will not scale because they need now a culture of structure and repeatable processes. And so all organizations, all teams, every year, every couple of years, need to reevaluate their culture and align that culture to the new strategy for that business. Next.
Perfect. And so then we've got a couple of polls here, and it's going to help us kind of understand where everybody's at as we go through today's presentation. So this first one, and I'm going to pull it up here in a second. So give me 1 second, pull it up, and then I'll read it off. Okay, so it should be distributing the poll now for everybody. Do you use culture benchmarks in your hiring process other than interviewing? So take interviewing out of the equation. Do you do some kind of assessment or something around looking at a person's behaviors, motivators, ideal work environment to map them into your culture? Yes, no, I don't know. We'll give it about 15 more seconds here. Okay, 5 more seconds. I'm actually going to give it 5 more seconds here because there's a lot of votes still coming in. All right. So go ahead and share it there. And Juan, I don't know if you can see the results on your end, but 40% said yes. They do use culture benchmarks. 44% said no, and 16% said, I don't know. So if you want to talk to that for just a second.
Yeah, so it's interesting, let's put the 16 with the 44. So basically, we're pretty sure that 60% of people aren't truly using sophisticated or process type benchmarks for culture other than, maybe interviewing. And so it's good to see that 40% of you actually already do. So that's great to see. Next.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next poll here. So you should see it pop up here in just a moment. Okay, so does culture fit mean more of the same or different to you? So select one of the following: same, different, or it depends. I'll just let you do that here for 30 seconds. Again, does culture fit mean more of the same or different to you? Select one of the following: same, different, or it depends. All right. About 5 more seconds here. All right, Juan, I'll bring up the results here, and then I'll move us on to the next slide. But for the question, does culture fit mean more of the same or different to you? 20% said same, 16% said different, 64% said it depends. So I'll go ahead and hide that, but then I'll let you talk to the results as I move on to this next slide. Okay.
So really encouraging to see that 64% of you said that it depends. So that's great, because what we have been finding in a lot of our clients, a lot of conferences, a lot of just going to market, because that's what we do is culture, there seems to be a lot of confusion. And so some people, they get upset when they hear culture fit, and they just assume that it means the same. And then other people, in this case, 64%, I'm actually shocked that it's so high, but that's great. We have a very evolved group here, because you are not the norm, those of you on this call. Say, on this call you are, because you're 64%, but usually it's in the minority where fit depends on what you're trying to achieve. So there are 16% who said it means different, and sure enough, yes, fit could be either. It could be, we have a call center, we have 500 people, we know what works, we identify the behaviors and the values and the work styles of what works of our high performers, and we just want to clone that profile. We don't want somebody coming in as a call center agent being completely different. They're not working with other people, they're literally just executing on tasks. We want X, and let's clone it. Same with a manufacturing plant that has a circuitry board system where people are just, and I only know this because my first job in high school, which was miserable, was welding on a circuitry board for a train company, electronic circuitry board. And I spent 7 hours welding the same 2 pieces on that circuitry board. And there was a model of high performance and a certain profile of somebody who would be very good at that. I quit after 4 weeks because I was not good at that, and that was not my profile. But that is a clone that role type fit, as well as maybe a salesperson who's carry the bag and they're not interacting with other people, again, clone. Now, that might be 30% of roles out there, cashier, register, etc. The other 60 to 70% of roles, what we find in our customers, our clients that are using our platform, as well as just in general, when you ask conceptually to CEOs and hiring managers, they actually don't want more of the same. They want to have better problem-solving teams. The bigger your company, the more complex the challenges you are solving in terms of products and services that you deliver to your customers. Okay, the more complexity, the larger your organization, the more cross-functional, the more matrix, all the way up to those 50,000, 100,000 person organizations. I worked at one like that called Procter & Gamble. And the complexity is enormous. And the last thing a company like that wants is same think. And so hiring for culture fit generally means at those larger companies, something that adds diversity of thought to the team. So fit to the team is something that's an add or an augment. So that's one example. Another one is at an engineering team, they could look at the team and say, we're all too similar. We all do Ruby on Rails. We're now changing our Agile or Scrum methodology with a new technology. We need somebody who's different. So fit in that engineering example means diversity of skills. And a third example where fit could be different could be we're a startup. An example I gave earlier in the talk, we are a startup. We've been very changed in our behaviors. We've been very innovative in our value system and very creative in the way we do things. Now we're at $1 million in revenue. We got to get to 10 million. Culture fit for that new strategy of scaling is not creative and change. Culture fit is bringing someone in key positions that's actually structured and process oriented. And yes, what does fit mean when it's different? It means harder to manage and potential friction. We'll get to that later on how you onboard that fit, which is different, but it's good to start to highlight that culture fit, like 64% of you now seem to already know, could be the same or different.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you're going to mention here shortly is, aligning that culture to the strategy, and it's more of a fit to that future culture. So it could be change, it could be the same, and that's going to come up here in another slide. But we put together this slide here to kind of like, okay, we've got a market definition of what a lot of people think it is, and then we've got the what we're talking about in terms of what we're going to use as culture fit in today's discussion. But Juan, I'll go ahead and kick it back to you here.
Right. Well, great, Charles. And I kind of verbally talked through this slide already, but Charles did a great job in researching, many sources to get to this slide. So he's kind of broken it up, and it's a great slide. If there's 1 or 2 slides that you want to take pictures of in our presentation, I think this would be one of them. It kind of lays out kind of the confusion in the market, but then adds clarity. There's the market definition, which good to see 64% of you don't fall for this definition that fit means the same. There's the way we at Humantelligence define culture fit, which is it depends. Fit is aligning the culture to the strategy, and it could be the same or different, an additive. Culture add is where you're bringing new elements, whether it's skills or personality, into the group, the way they get things done. And culture contribution, implies, either cloning or diversity of thought, where both could actually be a positive impact on that culture. So the takeaway here is no matter what you call it, and let's not get caught up in nomenclature, okay? Depending on the 3 steps outlined earlier, the measurement step, the strategy you want, and the target culture to align to that strategy, there are ways that you can infuse a measured, calculated, controlled way to align culture and strategy, whether it is similar or different. Next.
Yeah, and one thing to point out here in that takeaway, it mentions 3 steps that we outlined. So we actually moved this slide up kind of before the webinar started. We're going to get to those 3 steps. They're basically pre-work steps. It's coming up here in like 4 slides. So keep that takeaway in mind as we go through these next ones.
Okay. So what is culture by intention? It is the active understanding, defining, and alignment between a target culture and strategy for a more intentional business outcome. Today, this is in the past, and for many companies today, it has traditionally been at the C-suite level where they define an inspirational, aspirational culture and say, this is what we want the company to be. And they kind of set it and forget it for like 5 to 10 years. That's the old model. The new model, like most things, product development, strategy, it used to be set it and forget it for 2-year time chunks. That's what we did at Procter & Gamble back in the early 90s when I started there as a brand manager. But now it's all about agile development, both product, technology, and even strategy. Things change so fast now. Culture can change on a dime, as we saw with COVID. And between February and March, culture never took into account working remote. Then culture, all of a sudden, every company is now a remote work company. That's a huge impact on culture and the strategy how to support a business model if you're a restaurant. What are the restaurants going to do now with outdoor seating in the Northeast now that the winter's coming? Okay, you might have to change your culture even from the last 5 months to the next 5 because strategy changes. And so a new strategy, which happens every year, let alone possibly every quarter, necessitates a reevaluation of your target culture and an evaluation of who you have on the team today, what you need, and then how you hire and develop people for that strategic culture alignment. Next. Now that we've clarified culture fit, let's talk, what are we talking about specifically about culture? Many of you have seen these next 2 slides who've been on other presentations, so feel free to do some emails for the next 3 minutes. For others, here's how Humantelligence measures it, and it's based on Deloitte's definition, and Deloitte isn't the master of all definitions. However, they are pretty aligned with the way PwC, the Katzenbach Center there defines it, and Deloitte, this is kind of the definition from the Burson Institute. But most behavioral scientists and psychologists, industrial design, industrial organization folks believe that this is the definition of culture. Culture is, and the only thing we've added is the color to highlight the most important parts and the numbers. And we call this our BMW framework. So they define culture as number 3, the way things get done, which is what we call work energizers and work styles in your organization, sustained patterns of behavior, what we call the B in our BMW framework, that are over time are supported by shared experiences and values, what we call motivators and beliefs of the organization. So culture is what transforms from an individual BMW, so one's own self-awareness and who they are and how they work, their behaviors, motivators, and work styles, into the rolling up from bottom up, not a aspirational culture defined by the C-suite told to everyone down, but a bottom-up who your people are, how they think, how they work into a collective cohesive whole. So you roll up the data, the insights on 1 to 5, you have a team, to 10, a bigger team, to a division of 500 people, bottom up. Their behaviors, their work styles, and their value system is the culture. Now, interestingly, many people put leadership as part of culture, but what they have found in research that a great culture at an organization doesn't rely on command and control. That's the underlying sentence there. At Procter & Gamble, which is a pretty well-respected company with a very strong culture, their whole mantra to us always was, the individual is obsolete in terms of setting the culture for the company in terms of leader. You might have an impact on your team, but if we got rid at Procter & Gamble of the top 10% of all leaders, all employees who run the company, the culture wouldn't change at all, because culture is truly a bottom-up approach to what is successful. Next. And so some other things that these scientists have shown is not culture, is things that are very important that get confused into culture. The vision, and I apologize, I have a 12-month in my remote work situation that's not cooperating in the background. I apologize if that's too loud. But what is not culture, but very important, where effort should be spent, but to not get confused with culture. It's not your vision, it's not your mission, it's not the benefits you give to your employees. You could give every person a new Apple phone, it doesn't mean that your culture has changed as an organization. It's not engagement surveys. We've all seen how SuccessFactors has now got rid of Qualtrics. They realize that the engagement surveys are not the ultimate and end all in solving issues at a company. Engagement surveys, you know, as we're all learning, are really important to see where there are pockets of people who are discontent, unhappy, and miserable and about to quit. So it's basically an engagement survey gets to, well, great, and also great for product ideas and getting insights from your employees from all levels. I mean, that's wonderful about engagement surveys. But in terms of the culture piece, it's really, you're in the hospital at the ER and someone's on life support. That's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to solve, if you do a survey on diversity and people realize on the engagement survey say there's no diverse people, that's not going to solve the problem of diversity. It won't change your culture just to do engagement surveys. There are tools that like Humantelligence that will get to the core problem of why you don't have diversity or why you can't work remote well. Leadership, we've gone through that, and consultants, all things that are important, but not your actual culture. Again, aspirational culture, a guy named Don Soul, professor at Harvard and MIT, just came out with a study in the MIT Sloan Management Review that proved that for all of the aspirational cultural attributes in the Fortune 500, 98% of company employees at those companies actually don't believe their companies live and act by those cultural aspirational values. So what is culture? It's simple. It's your people, their psychology, and the work environment they create or establish, and it is measurable. And then when we talk measuring it, it's just measuring these things. It's the behaviors of your people, the motivators, and the work environment. We do it across 28 things. There are products out there like DISC and Predictive Index and Strength Finders and Plum and Pymetrics and Caliper and Berkman that also measure behaviors. They don't really get into the values and motivators. There you have other companies such as SHL, Hogan, Lominger, great tools. All of these are scientifically based tools that measure motivators, except some of them take a lot of time and are very expensive. And then very few of them, there are a few, get into understanding the work environment and what energizes people. So you could have 2 Predictive Index folks or 2 Plum folks or 2 Hogan folks who are doing the same job in the same company, but one's miserable, one's happy, all because of what energizes them, the work environment, and what energizes them. So you really need to understand culture across these 3 elements and about 28 things. Next. We won't go through these next slides just to save time, but in this packet that we're going to send, we have a client called ATP Co. in the airline industry that is a heavy user of our platform for culture management. This presentation today is about hiring for culture, but there's this whole other handoff that takes place. Once you can hire for a culture by intention, then there's the management of culture. And just like Salesforce software helps a salesperson manage sales and sales lead and the sales process, you should look at culture as something that you manage, and there is now culture as a service. What we do, Humantelligence, is CAS, C-A-A-S, culture as a service, to manage your culture over time, not in monthly or quarterly or yearly moments, but every single day, managing culture to have the culture you want throughout your organization. These are just some of the ways they do it. Charles, just slowly go next slide. I won't speak, but just so they can see what they'll get when they open this up.
Yeah, and when I do send it out after the webinar, I'll go ahead and get the link to the recording as well, because this was presented last week to a
great
group
idea.
at HR Tech Roundtable, and so we'll send out that recording along with this case study. So
yeah, the head of the learning and development organization at this organization, I think Stephanie Hassel presented as a case study without me, so you won't have to hear me again. She presented for 20 minutes on the case study and how they use it for culture management. Okay, back to our presentation. There are three, now we're getting into the, we've talked about culture fit and what it is and what it's not. We've talked about culture and specifically how we measure it and how it can be used for recruiting. Now we're going to get into more tactical steps of what you can put into process. There's three pre-work steps that you need to take prior to recruiting intentionally for a culture. One, measure the current culture of your existing teams. In the past, I was the recruiter or the search firm asking the hiring manager, but both with the hiring manager, hey, what's the culture of your team? And it's kind of, the hiring manager's like, well, I'm just looking at these skills. Give me a resume with these qualities. I need this. And okay, hardworking, team-oriented, entrepreneurial spirit, problem solver, right? There's like a template that we used to use at Hydro Controls and Korn Ferry. Ironically, it was like the same template that we use in all attribute sections of job descriptions. Many of you might find the same thing on that section around personality. Two, then understand with the hiring manager, where is it that the company needs to go or the team needs to go in terms of strategy? So whether it's the company level and hiring thousands of people for a division, whether it's a divisional head or a team leader, what is the strategy and would a new culture be needed and where is the current culture? And so taking the measurement of where you are, current state, theoretically thinking where you want to go as a hiring manager and recruiting and talent acquisition, working with that manager to see where that is. Then three, is there a gap? Is there a gap between what you want as a culture for your business strategy and where you are today? That is the pre-work that should take place before you can hire intentionally. Next. There's a study by Jaruzelski, and I apologize if I mispronounce these names, but Jaruzelski, Lohr, and Holman from 2011, which was a landmark study that research found that when companies align their cultures to innovation strategies, they achieve greater enterprise value growth at 30% relative to other companies and increased profit growth at 17%. And so on the right there, you have the tables that show the actual measured difference between those companies that can align their culture to innovation, for instance. Similarly, all of your companies can improve in the marketplace and perform better if you can align your strategy to your culture and not a set it and forget it aspirational t-shirt coffee mug version of your culture at the corporate level of 4 stated values, but literally at each divisional, functional, and team level. Next. So what does your pre-work show when you do it? What will it show? Critical questions that you should answer or be able to answer. It'll show whether your current culture is aligned to your strategy. It'll show if there's a gap. Does your target culture need some changes based on that strategy? And does your results, do your results show that you need to clone more of what you have or show that you need something different that aligns with your targets? On that third bullet, I'll just bring back that example. Humantelligence, when we went from 5 people to 15 people, we hit a roadblock on our performance as a company. We were the first strategy and challenge was to create amazing products that were unique in the marketplace, solving a problem called culture, hiring, culture management that nobody else had ever done before. And we hired really innovative, creative, change-oriented people in this BMW framework. But about 2 years ago, we hit a wall. We couldn't get past 400,000 in revenue. To get to 10 million, we needed to scale. We couldn't be doing 20 different demos. We couldn't be doing 20 different POs and purchase orders and invoicing. We couldn't do 20 different training sessions for every customer. We needed to be able to hire, scale, and hire quickly, 10, 20 people a month. We needed to be able to onboard 10 customers a month and do it quickly with the same quality. And so we needed a completely new strategy and a new culture. And so that was the gap we identified and then hired to it. Next.
Yeah, and let me just jump in real quick because I know typically at the 30-minute mark, some people have to run to other meetings. This is going to be recorded and slides will be sent out. So just so you all feel comfortable in that, I will make sure that you have the follow-up materials if you have a meeting and you have to jump off.
But the best part is coming up next.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're getting real tactical on the steps, right? Recruiting steps for establishing this culture by intention. Step one, get the basic job requirements from the hiring manager. We all need to do a job description. And, there's debates about what to include there. We won't go there, but I'll let that be for other blogs and job boards. Two, this is where the culture becomes important. Set the fit factors, and that's benchmarks against the target culture for what you need for this role, for what you need to work with the team, with what you need to work with the manager. Do you want someone similar or different to the manager? To what you need to work with the company culture. There are 4 or 5 fit factors that impact who you hire. Okay. 3, start to, in the process of getting applications, assess the candidates, not just for their skills, i.e. what you see on LinkedIn or their resume, which is about 30% predictive in terms of performance, but also the 70% predictive, which assess them on the culture fit to these 4 or 5 fit factors. And that can be through a simple questionnaire assessment tool like the one we have at Humantelligence, or like the ones at these other behavioral or motivational value type assessment tools. Step 4, build a short list based on benchmarks, okay, for review by the hiring manager. Once you kind of get the job description, get candidates, go through the resumes, find the best people on paper in terms of resume and skills and experience, then filter them through step 3 and say, hey, hiring manager, we have these 10, and here's how we rank them, not only based on skills, because it's actually easier to find skills match these days than it is the culture fit piece. Okay, and then rank them on that culture fit to what is most important to a hiring manager, whether it's finding someone who fits with the manager, fits with the team, and that means similar or different, adding to the team culture in terms of diversity of thought. If it's the team that all of them need to migrate to a completely different way of being, then it'd be something opposite to the team. Then you hire that person. Now, it doesn't stop there. Part of the culture management part of our platform, once you hire someone, a candidate, you need to onboard them. And so there is the looking side by side, how is this person similar or different to the hiring manager, to the team, based on this alignment of culture to the strategy. And that step 6, that hiring manager and new employee should understand each other using this tool to get off to the best start possible in their relationship. Whether they're similar or very different, you still need to do that exercise. Next. So again, step 1, get the basic job requirements, okay, from the leader, the hiring manager. Next. Step 2, you can see here in the top green bar block, organizational fit. So a platform like ours allows the recruiting talent acquisition person at a large organization, or companies that are using our Hire Guru for independent recruiters that might have clients that they're sending candidates to for a search they're conducting. Either way, you would work with the manager and say, hey, do you want this person to fit with your team's culture, or maybe the entire group? So is it just the baristas at the Starbucks on Lincoln Road in Miami, or is it the fit with all of Starbucks in Florida? Okay, Then you would say, manager, you're the head of the Starbucks store in Lincoln Road. Do you want someone similar to you or complementary? And you can also turn that off. The manager might say, it doesn't matter about me and how I get along with them. I want someone more just with the team in that Lincoln Road store. I want them to be very similar. Or we've learned that maybe diversity of thought and the way they solve problems in the store is a better face to the consumers that come in. So actually, I want something complement to the team. Next, you would go to that third area that's called ideal talent profile. You would work with the hiring manager and say, okay, now that Starbucks is not having people in the store because of COVID and social distancing, we need someone who understands the quickness of getting a product from the inside the store to curbside, who is able to go out, see many customers waiting for their product, identify them, shout loudly, who's an extrovert and not an introvert, and where before you could have an introvert, for example, and identify the customer, interact with them, get the money, count it quickly, be a problem solver on the spot, see if there's a difference in what they owe, go back inside to the register, and get the change, right? There might be a change. So is it a new custom profile for the new strategic environment for Starbucks in COVID? Or for a new manufacturing process that somebody now has to do 2 jobs because out of 1,000 employees, they can only now have 500 because of social distancing. So this new concept that somebody has to do 2 different jobs, it might be a different profile. Either way, whatever the ideal profile is, maybe for the team, the example there on the ideal talent profile, that target team culture, there it could be my software company, Humantelligence. Remember, we're going from a creative, innovative change culture to a structured, balanced, cautious culture. Well, maybe click that bucket, and then all applicants will be compared against that target culture. So whether it's a change in culture for an ideal, for an individual role, a relationship, or the team, you can set it there and forget it. And then high performers, the last one. You could literally put in, hey, at Starbucks, we have these 7 high performers around the country that are the best. Let's recreate and clone them. Now, what Starbucks would probably learn is the culture of the Starbucks in Miami, where it's all Latin customers and Latin employees, is very different than the culture in Boston. So it's probably unlikely that cloning a barista profile would be the best option for Starbucks. They probably would have different cultures in different areas. And so you probably would want to set your best culture after doing a study and seeing, is it about cloning the same profile for a barista, or is it about having diverse thinking and diverse thought in a store? Our learning from the data in many of our retail and restaurant chains that we work with is actually diversity of thought leads to better net promoter scores and better service at stores in terms of solving those momentarily problems that always come up in the retail and fast food and restaurant environments. Next. Once you do that, step 3 is then to assess the candidates. Send out the link or have it on your website. A simple API for most assessment tools can do this, where it will then quickly shoot off all the people apply an assessment test where you can measure that. And in our case, it would be measuring the BMW, the behaviors, motors, and work energizers, and see a multi-dimensional view of those candidates across all 3 of those. To note, it's not good enough only to use behavioral tools. If tools don't get into the values and motivators, that's the most important piece, as well as the environment that will energize someone. So make sure that whatever assessment tool you're using, it does those 2 other things. Otherwise, it's not going to be very predictive in understanding the culture and what leads to success. Next. Step 4, here's an example. You can assume each of the rows is a different candidate. An automated process that saves you up to 80% of the time, all the phone screens and all the meetings that, store or manufacturing plant leaders have, or even, white collar roles like investment banks, meeting all these people are doing phone screens for, as a recruiter or a talent acquisition manager. Stop all that craziness. Running around like a chicken with your head cut off, going through resumes and doing phone screens is the old model. Using this very light AI to sort people by culture fit will allow you to look at, let's say, these 7 candidates quickly and show that even though the 4th one and the 3rd one down, the 77 and 70 and the 73 and 79, even though the manager and the team, if they were to interview those 2 candidates, okay, they would love them. If you look at ideal column 3, and high performance column 4, 37 red and 57 orange, okay, and 36 and 63, that 3rd and 4th row In the old model, people who meet people they like get hired and hire those people. Instead, a tool like this, platforms like this, will allow you to avoid those bad hires who everyone loves and everyone thinks are great, but are not a good alignment with the future strategy and the culture of what is needed. Instead, you'll be able to go with the last row and quickly skip 7 other interviews and phone screens and go straight to the last row, to the person who, although they're a great fit with the manager and the team, they're also a great fit for performance. Same thing with the third row, maybe if it's high performance. Data-driven recommendations to the hiring manager. Next. Step 4, benchmark continued. Now think about giving to your hiring manager, or as an internal talent acquisition person or an independent recruiter to your client, the hiring manager, side-by-side reports so that they can see how an individual person can fit with either the manager, the team, or even today's world, remote work. So some tools out there are already set up to show you the psychology of a good remote worker. You can use this tool to hire for specific culture targets like remote work. Imagine being able to present to the hiring manager, hey, these 20 people are going to be good at remote work. What a lot of companies are learning and what a lot of our clients are learning is with COVID and remote work, the top performers you had for the last 2 years in a role often have become bad performers now working from home. And contrarily or inversely, some of the worst performers now working from home have become the best performers. The job hasn't changed. Okay, what leads to success does. And that is a psychological challenge for many people. And so culture is key to solving that challenge. Next. Step 5, once you hire a candidate, you want to onboard them. And this starts to get into team culture management. You know, you want to move them into the team. And so this is the first step, is not only how do they fit with each person, but how do they fit to the team culture and what you hired them against. So you should now already have a system that shows you your current culture, shows your target team culture as this visual here, and the gap of where your current team or division or company is and where they want to go. And yes, it's scoreable. There's a scorecard. This is no longer fluffy, soft words. This is numbers, metrics, KPIs, where you are in your journey from where you are today to where you want to go by quarter. And then each employee has a development plan, existing employees, and let's say Vlad is a new employee, on where they add and augment the culture to align to that future strategy. And if you were to click on those action buttons, it would give a program, a programmatic script and prescription, not just a diagnostic, but a prescription on how those people can adapt their behaviors and their work styles to be the add to the culture, to change it to what is needed to succeed in the marketplace or on that team. Next. As well, you do want to look at side-by-side onboarding, how that new employee fits culturally with each and every person on the team, as well with the leader. So we call this step connection and collaboration. If you do it well, looking at psychometric data across 3 lenses, BMW, not just B, but behaviors, motivators, and work styles, you can take connection and collaboration to a better resonance. What we're all trying to achieve at work isn't just connecting, it's resonating. And so if you look here, okay, on the left, hiring manager and new employee should do their culture comparison as well as other employees on that team. And the intentionality doesn't stop once that hire is made. You need to know that if you're hiring someone different, it's going to be challenging because they're not the same. So in this case, Charles, who's the co-presenter on this webinar, and Kurt, okay, are different. 50% of the time they complement each other. And so you can look when Charles clicks on a calendar invite or an email, all this data is presented to Charles before he talks or calls or writes or is in a meeting with Kurt. He can see, if you can see there in that pop-up where it says Kurt Clark with the 3 emoji characters, the business personas, if you click on the square below, tips for communicating with Kurt, it'll pop up some tips on, based on his psychology and based on Charles, the best way of communicating are these ways. Tips on influencing Kurt, tips on motivating Kurt. Let's say if you're L&D, tips on how Kurt learns. Lastly, you can see at the bottom right charts and tips on just visually where there will be the conflict to best manage that relationship. Next. We have 3 more slides, and then we'll get into question and answer for the last 15 minutes. So 2 quick tips to take away for external recruiters, these independent recruiters. It works for them as well as internal talent acquisition recruiters. So when you use our Hire Guru to smarter recruiting with culture insights as an independent recruiter, these are 2 things to keep in mind. The culture map. There is a way of scoring and measuring culture now, okay? And it is not fluffy and soft. It is a measurement, and you can map the culture of the team you're hiring for. The hiring manager would appreciate it. It gives them great insights that you're no longer a transactional recruiter, but actually a advisory consultant to the hiring manager. You can offer it as a value added to your client, okay, or that hiring manager. This will give expert insights on how candidates will fit into their team culture. Okay, no longer are we all going to be using the same template about we want someone with the attributes of hardworking, roll up the sleeves, go-getter, but team-oriented, cross-functional, great communicator, all the blah, blah, blah that's been vague for 100 years will no longer be the case. And then the second tip, future matching, save the insights, these profiles for all the people in your candidate pools, so that you can both internally at a company use it for career matching. If someone's going to leave sales because they're not a good fit, instead of firing them or having them quit, maybe they're a better fit in customer service. Okay, that example you can find by the profile of where the person might be a best fit. Same with an external recruiter. When you have a database of candidates, maybe they weren't the right fit for one client, one hiring manager, or one company's culture. You can then do a search in your database for certain culture fits for a CFO or for an analyst or for a marketer, but for another client that does have that culture requirement. Next. So 5 key benefits to take away. This would be probably a 3rd slide you want to take a picture of, okay? The benefits of recruiting with culture benchmarks is that it makes you intentional in building a culture by intention. It helps you streamline your interview process by 80%, get rid of all these subjective phone screens and interviews, and just go straight to your final candidates. 3, you place candidates faster and better quality candidates, okay? Who then, in the 4th one, with the handshake there in blue, stay longer. You deliver qualified candidates that will be more engaged and remain in their role longer. Less turnover for your company, for the division you're servicing as a talent acquisition group, for the hiring manager, and if you're a recruiting firm, independent recruiting firm, for your searches, you can even give guarantees of 3 months and not 1 year, because you know that there's going to be a better fit, and that was part of your process, not a hope and wish part of the process. And 5th, as the study at the beginning showed, and as our clients have seen who are now outperforming their competitors, if you focus on hiring for a culture of intention, you will improve your business performance compared to your competitors by aligning culture to strategy, the first time that it has been possible in the history of businesses, because it's the first time that you can use data to not only measure culture, but track it on your roadmap from today's steady state to future culture roadmap. Next.
Okay, cool. So that actually brings us to our Q&A session. First off, thanks, Juan. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions here, and we've got a handful, but feel free to start thinking of questions and getting them in here, and we've got about 10 minutes to go through them. I forgot to put a questions slide in here, so I'm going to get creative and just put this thing I built last second up on the screen. So I don't know if you can see that, but anyways, the first question, Juan, is I want to offer culture fit as a value add to my clients. How can I get the benchmarks from my client?
So, hold on a second, I just lost my screen. So, can you repeat that, Charles? Somehow my screen went blank and it threw me off.
Yep. I want to offer culture fit as a value add to my clients. How can I get the benchmarks from my client? So I'm assuming they're asking how
Oh,
they
great
can get the
question.
culture benchmarks from their client and things like
Great
that.
question. So so I was a recruiter for Heidrick and Struggles. I was a partner for 4 years and a partner at Korn Ferry for 4 years. And I was on my own. I ran my own search firm called Gonza Executive Search, grew it to $3 million a year, executive level, C-suite type jobs. So I understand that question from an independent recruiter standpoint. It's not always easy. So, not all clients understand the importance of this. So you need to understand that probably a third of your clients will love it. They'll see not only the culture fit for the hire as a value add, but they'll also see the team culture mapping as a consultative way of better understanding their team. And so you will become the recruiter of choice for years to come. And that's what happened when I used this tool for that company, the research firm I worked at. So a third will get it. A third, you'll have to explain it to them, and a third will just say, no, I don't want anything else. I don't want work. So what you do is tools like Humantelligence and soon other companies that will follow us, they're all going to create this. So we're not, we just were the first ones, but there are going to be 20 companies like ours soon. You have a link that you simply send to the client, and they can either just move some slide bars over on a 5-minute process, and it says, do you want someone in behaviors? Do you want someone decisive, deliberate? On a scale of 0 to 10, how far? Do you want someone in terms of motivation to be more creative or innovative, right? That's one way, right? Having the client do it and then send it, it automatically gets populated into the system. 2, you can do it the same way you've done it by phone. Hey, client, what is the culture you want on your team? What's the culture you need in your strategy? And then while they're telling you on the phone, you would use a tool like ours, the Hire Guru, if you're an independent recruiter, or Talent Fit for Recruiting, if you're at a company, doing the same exact exercise with a hiring manager. So the 3 ways of doing this is the same, whether you're an external recruiter or a hiring manager at a company. And you could just use that same tool yourself while they're speaking through what they're looking for. And the third way is to let the data show and just give it to maybe high performers, low performers, convince the manager of that and say, hey, let's just use the data to tell us what we should hire. So there's 3 different ways, and not all clients will understand, but this is a crossing the chasm moment of new technology that is going to transform how to hire for a culture of intention. Next question.
Okay. Next question here is, how often would an employee or candidate need to take an assessment?
Great question. We don't charge and our clients don't pay for the assessment. I have been saying for 5 years that assessments are great for self-awareness. So every person in the world should have an assessment and have access to it. And that's why we give it for free. We have a consumer product for anybody out there with kids in high school or college. Actually, this is a $500 tool that used to cost $500 for 30 years before we bought it and digitized it. We're giving it for free in something called My Guru for college and career. So anybody out there, if you have kids in high school and college, it's self-awareness and then matching to the jobs and careers and how to apply to college and what they should do, et cetera. It's a free product. Go download it, have your kids download it. Now, similarly, in the similar vein for corporate world, we're giving it for free to our clients. Why? Because culture and improving the value to a client, it's about the aggregate data. And so our clients are paying for a platform. So we have no incentive to try to make money for every assessment by candidate or by every assessment by employee. And so candidates, I do not recommend them taking it more than once for a certain job because then they'll try to game it the second time. Employees, you give it to them, have them take it as much as they want. Now, reality is young people change a lot. So behaviors and work styles change a lot between 14 and 22. So if you have a millennial Gen Z crowd where you're working, every year makes sense. You'll see massive changes. If you have 22 to 30-year-olds, usually once or twice during that decade. From 30 to 50, not so much change in value system. Sometimes behavioral or work styles, depending on if you've changed jobs or had a life crisis. So the right way to do it is make it available to take every year. There is a concept that's being floated around in the world of theory and thought leadership that says that the human organism as a soul and vibration doesn't change only from within. It is impacted by the community and group around them. And so we see that today in social change and injustice in the US and what's happening in terms of change at the ballot booth, change in our local communities and people standing up. You will also see that at a company. And so maybe and there's no right or wrong answer, maybe every year everyone should take it, because when a company changes strategy and changes product, services, and an intention of where they want to go, they are, like an individual, manifesting what the new vibration of the organization is. And that new vibration from top down to bottom, and certain vocal people from an energy level could change the vibration and therefore the behaviors and values and work styles of people within that team, group, division, or company. So you literally could change individual results, which prior to these years, people thought, oh, your values are set forever. Now we'll have data, and you can take screenshots on a platform like ours of individuals, of teams, of divisions at different times. So you can have this kind of journey and screenshots of what culture looks like over time. Next question.
Okay, I have an interesting one here. We've got about 2.5 minutes here, so we may have time for just this one last one. If we didn't get to your question, we'll make sure to follow up after the fact. But this next question is, you mentioned Hire Guru. As a recruiter, does my client get the results of the team I'm placing into?
It's up to you. So you can share the individual assessments with the hiring manager or client that you're working with for the final candidates, for all candidates, or for none of them. Up to you. These are all things you can turn on and off in the system. Similarly, if there's a question that's coming up about the candidate experience, you can turn this on so all candidates get the short 1-page report as well as a 10-page report. Why? Our tool at least has passed all the adverse impact studies and is technically valid. So nobody can prevent anyone from getting sued in the US, but even if you're sued for using a psychometric, you would not lose in a court of law because it actually measures what it says it does. And so, there's no legal risk of using a tool like this and giving it to candidates. And more importantly, if you want to move away from the fear vibration of life and lawyers and look at the world from a view of abundance and happiness, you want your candidates to have a great experience. So for every candidate you hire, there's about 1,000 that you're saying no to. Wouldn't you want your brand as a hiring company to be positive, where you give a gift of self-awareness and help start this democratization of self-awareness to all the applicants? So we do highly recommend doing it for that. On the team culture mapping, yes, you should also give this to your client. I can assure you that companies so outside recruiting firms using a platform like ours, they have happy clients, the clients stay longer, the candidates stay longer. They will never not only lose that client, they become a trusted advisor, not just someone filling seats, but helping build the strategy and culture of that company, their client, and that client then starts using them for every search in that organization. It starts to expand the footprint. Next question, last question.
I think we're just going to go on to the next slide here, actually. We are out of time. So first off, Juan, thank you. Great as always, and appreciate that. And thank you to our audience for attending today. We had a really good turnout today. And, keep in mind, we've got some free tools out there. I put them in the chat box so you have a chance to download those. But they'll come out in the follow-up message as well. EQ everywhere. We've also got that free self-assessment. Keep in mind also, we've now launched Hire Guru. So let us know if that's something you want to try out. So once again, thank you so much for joining Juan and I today and spending the last hour with us. We'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. God bless you and be safe.